Look, Edwin Murray might have invented recycling, but I refuse to believe that Edwin Murray invented teleporting. Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the Toast, Rytos, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, like we always do. And I'm going to be honest, I think I'm starting to run out of things to say directly about Secret of the Mimic. So I think in the upcoming episodes, we'll probably focus more on other games and at least how the Secret of the Mimic connects to those. I think it's less of a I'm running out of things to say and more of a not burnout. Burnout's not the right word. But like I've talked about this game for actually over 2 months straight. So I think I need to talk about other games, you know? So to get it out of my system, I kind of wanted to do just a bunch of questions about Secret of the Mimic that are in the inbox right now. And I do want to remind everybody, we are 3 episodes away from the 100th episode of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I don't know what I'm going to do for it yet, but think for the questions that y'all submit, you know, to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com, which in the description copy paste because pin type out. For the people, like, for questions you're going to submit, think about, like, big overarching questions. And maybe I'll try to collect a bunch of those for the 100th episode. I don't know yet. It's a possibility. But like I said, for today's episode, because I kind of wanted to go back to covering all of FNAF and not just this one game, I wanted to focus on this one game for this episode. So that being said, I pulled up a bunch of y'all's questions. Let's hop right into them. The first one isn't from anybody in particular, because the first one I've gotten dozens of. A lot of you are very curious about my thoughts on this. And the question essentially boils down to, what if William Afton kidnapped David, and that's who the crying child is? Which, like, look, I just don't see it. There's a couple reasons why I'm against it. Is it very technically possible? Sure. So to set the stage as to what happens with David and the weirdness around him, we know he was left at his outdoor playground, unsupervised, and then someone went to go get him. M1 specifically was told to go get him on his, I believe it's 5th or 6th birthday. And that's the same day he died because the party is still there, untouched. And we get that email about like, hey everybody, bad news, you know? So we know that's the day he died or disappeared, if this theory is correct. So the thinking is, what happened to David? There's a very obvious answer that I think is the correct one, but a lot of people have been wondering about William Afton's involvement in this. Because, I mean, to be fair, throughout the rest of this franchise, if there's a dead child, William Afton's probably nearby. That's kind of his MO. That's his whole shtick. So the question is, did William Afton kill David, or this specifically, kidnap David? Let's do kill first, I think, because both of those were very often asked. Did William Afton kill David? I don't think so. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. At this point in the timeline, William Afton is, you know, a seedy businessman and clearly very antagonistic to those around him. But at this point in the timeline, he's never killed anybody, right? We're talking the early 1970s. Or at least the mid to late 1970s. Like, this is pre-Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This is pre-Springlock incident. This would make the first death William Afton killing David Murray for seemingly no reason. You know, is it to crush his business? That seems a little extreme. He's already doing that without killing David. So I don't really see a reason for William Afton to kill David Murray. You know, maybe that goes on the route a lot of people take where William Afton has no motivations. He's just a crazy serial killer who likes killing people and wants to be immortal. You know, there is that interpretation out there. And if that's your interpretation, then I guess fair play. You know, if he's just a crazy guy who kills any kid he gets nearby, sure, David Murray's in danger. But if you're someone like me who likes to think that William Afton has motivations for the things he does because he's a real character and not a cartoon, like, well, he is a the best depiction we have of him is literally like 10 pixels. But you know what I'm trying to say. Like, he's not he's not like a caricature of just, I kill every child I get nearby. It's, you know, these characters have motivations. Now, again, like I always have to say, because I can hear some of you already write in the comments, am I saying that William Afton had justifiable reasons to do any of the things he did? Of fucking course not. I'm not sitting here saying, it doesn't make sense for William Afton to kill David. It's only understandable and justifiable for him to kill the other 17 children he killed. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying in William Afton's mind, William Afton's motivations line up with the people we know William Afton killed. David Murray doesn't have any motivations in William Afton's mind to kill, as far as we're aware anyway. You know, as with the evidence we have in front of us, I see no reason for William Afton to kill David Murray. Now let's take that a step further. Did William Afton kidnap David Murray and turn him into the crying child? Take everything I just said, ditto, but even more so, we know for a fact that William Afton was still in contact with Edwin Murray and Murray's Costume Manor for some time after David Murray died. Because we get that letter of William Afton sending to Edwin Murray about like, hey, we bought out the company. We would love for you to still work for us. Obviously, we won't touch your house. Your parents built that. But just let me know, right? This is this final nail in the coffin that's sinking Murray's Costume Manor. Which means when he received that, Murray's Costume Manor would have still been in operation. And we know from the audio logs that David died while Murray's Costume Manor was still in operation. So, in this like timeline of the evidence we have in front of us, David Murray dies or disappears while Edwin Murray is still trying to keep Murray's Costume Manor afloat. And, you know, it probably all goes to shit very shortly after that. You know, he makes M2, and M2 kind of ruins everything. So it's not around for much longer. But regardless, if William Afton is still, like, actively reaching out to Edwin Murray, not only does William Afton have seemingly no reason to kidnap Edwin Murray, that's crazy, but also he would have to, like, hide the fact that he has Edwin's son. Right, like, in this logic, Fiona, or M1 specifically, goes out to get David for his birthday, and David's gone. Everyone starts looking for him. And, you know, William Afton just has a new son now, and no one's going to bring that up. That's crazy. I see no feasible reason for William Afton to target David Murray. No reason to kill him, no reason to kidnap him, and frankly, I don't see how he could kidnap him and continue to talk to Edwin Murray and not have this be a huge mess. So for everyone asking, no, I don't think William Afton had anything to do with the death of David Murray. And to that extent, I also don't think he had anything to do with the fire at Fall Fest. I think the fire at Fall Fest was an accident. I think it makes the most sense that, you know, we see time and time again that Edwin Murray is a little lax on the safety features of the things he builds, and he rushes things out the door. So the idea that a huge accident at Fall Fest happened that burned everything up, including Fiona, that doesn't need malice. That can just be an accident, and I think that still works perfectly fine. I will say, the Fall Fest fire being on purpose definitely has more merit to it than William Afton killing David Murray or kidnapping him. Because, you know, there is the idea of, like, maybe Edwin really was desperate for the insurance money that gets floated by one of the employees, because, you know, the business is failing after all. Or, you know, there's the idea that William Afton is trying his best to make this business fail, and so he did it. You know, both of those are possible. I think they're more likely than William Afton killing or kidnapping David, but I still think they're unlikely. I think the most obvious solution here is that Edwin Murray is bad at doing things, and the Fall Fest fire was a completely preventable fire that happened because Edwin Murray is bad at doing things. That wasn't really the question I was addressing, but it was close enough, and my answer is similar enough that I'm like, now's the time to do that. Real quick, not a planned sponsor, I just want to drink some. Don't forget, you use code RIGHTOAST to get 10% off of GAMERSUPS. It's genuinely really good stuff. I drink this every single day. That they're not... Well, okay, I was going to say they're not paying me to say this. Yes and no. I make money when you use my code. The reason I promote the code, one, you get 10% off, but if you use the code, I get a cut. So that's how this whole operation works. I don't know if I'm allowed to say how much, and I'm not going to, but it's pretty good. I enjoy it. So when I say they're not paying me to say this, I get paid when you use the code. So, I'm a stranger on the internet. Take what I say with a grain of salt, as you always should with everybody. But to be fair, the reason I like working with GamerSupps is they've never told me what to say. They send me calendars of like, hey, here's some upcoming stuff if you wanted to plan anything, and that's it. I'm never held back. I'm never told like, hey, can you hit these points in the next ad? They are completely free-flowing with this, which is nice. So I can just say, this shit's good as hell. You should drink some, and that's approved, baby. But like, they're not paying me to say, I drink this every day, and you should too. I just get paid after I say stuff like that because people use the code. That's kind of how it works. That's how most of these affiliate stuff work. Tip to any like YouTubers out there: 9 times out of 10, if a sponsorship approaches you in that type of business model, you want to say no. 9 times out of 10, it's not worth it. GamerSupps is one of the rare exceptions because they are so free-flowing with the company itself, and it's a good cut. A lot of the time, the rate is really bad when it's like, oh yeah, you want to promote our, I don't know, hairbrushes? We won't pay you, but anytime someone buys a hairbrush with your code, you'll make $2. It's usually something like that. And then they'll be like, and you have to do 3 advertisements a month for us or we're cutting you off. Like, those are terrible deals. Do not take them. You're better than that. But that's one of the main reasons why I was so excited to work with GamerSupps, is because they are so like lax with it. They're like, hey, you know what works best. We're only paying you via not commission. What the fuck is the word for it? A rate you get, whatever that word is. That's the only way this works. So like, do whatever, and that's awesome. But yeah, GamerSupps. Our next question, and our first real question, comes from Rebecca. She, her. Do you think there's any connection between David, Pigpatch, and Tiger Rock / Plushie besides the heterochromia? This is a really interesting question, and I appreciate you sending this in, because like, it's one of those things I keep having to remind myself. Did Pigpatch always have that? Okay, he did. He always had the green and blue eye heterochromia. It's interesting. So it's one of those things that I think is a bookman's bluff on the surface. That being the idea that Scott, when he made the FNAF games, included a lot of random details. So now, whenever they want to say something was foreshadowed, they can pull one of those random details that was just put randomly, but now it means something. So I kind of think that's where Pigpatch fits into this, and let me explain. David and the Tiger Rock plushie both having heterochromia, I think makes a lot of sense, because I personally think the Tiger Rock plushie was customly made and maybe later became a character because there was like a candy bar for David. I think that was one of Murray's costume maker's inventions. And also, I think the Tiger Rock suit character that we see in game, I think that ghost is David Murray. So that heterochromia all lines up really well. I think that makes a lot of sense. What about Pigpatch? That's where things get confusing. I think, and we're not just going like, oh, every character who's ever had this exact heterochromia. No, because Pigpatch was then featured in Help Wanted 2, which is definitely mimic adjacent, as you'll see in this week's video. So we have to address that. Why is Pigpatch linked in some way to the mimic? I think, this is going out on a limb, but I think this is a bookman's bluff. When Pigpatch was originally created, did Scott even have the mimic storyline in mind? I don't think so. We're talking FNAF 6. This is like, what, 2017? When did that come out? Yeah, okay. December 4th, 2017. 8 years ago. God. FNAF 6 is 8 years ago. We always forget to appreciate how front-loaded the FNAF series is. Because, like, FNAF 1 came out August 8th, 2014. Ultimate Custom Night came out June 27th, 2018. The first 7 games of this franchise came out within the first 4 years of it. And, you know, it's because they were so smaller. They were a single dev team, so Scott could kind of churn them out. So, but now that they're bigger and more expansive and more intense, they take longer. But because of that, you look at these games, the Mimic was definitely planned by the time of Help Wanted. I don't think that's a stretch to say. Was the Mimic planned during when Scott was at the helm? I don't think so. But by the time of Help Wanted, I definitely think the Mimic was the underlying story that we were supposed to try to figure out. Which means, game-wise, right, the Mimic is only in Help Wanted, Security Breach, Help Wanted 2, Secret of the Mimic, not including like Ruin and other DLCs. It's 4 games. So, game-wise, the Mimic is in a minority here because, you know, we have the first 7 games, which focus on the story of William Afton. And then we have the latter 4, which are now focused on which are focused on the Mimic. And I believe we have one more game to finish this storyline and a nice tight 5, which actually, in retrospect, is really funny. That's 5 Nights at the Mimics. But regardless, but if you talk about how long the franchise has been around, William Afton was the focus of it for the first 4 years. Help Wanted came out 2019, which means the Mimic has been the focus of has been the main antagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's for a longer period of time than William Afton has been. Right? Which feels weird to say. But time-wise, William Afton was the main antagonist for 4 years of this franchise. And the Mimic, whether it was known or not, has been the main antagonist of this franchise for 6 years, coming on 6 this year. Which is crazy. Or actually just past 6 because Help Wanted came out in May. So this year marks the 6th year that the Mimic was the major antagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's. Which is crazy. That's crazy to think about. My math is getting weird because it's the 11th anniversary of FNAF, and 4 plus 6 is 10. So I don't know how I messed that up. Oh, it's because there's a year in between. Okay, I was like, what am I doing wrong here? No, it's because UCN came out in 2018, and Help Wanted came out in 2019. So there's a year gap in between where like no major games came out and there's no major antagonist in there. But yeah, that makes sense. Because that was the Fazbear Frights year, right? So, man, it's one of those things where, like, the question wasn't even about this, but it throws me off so much to consider, like, a character like the Mimic, who a lot of this franchise looks at and goes, this is a brand new character I've never heard about before, has technically been around as the main antagonist for a longer stretch of time than William Afton. That's crazy to me. You know, and you can argue that Glitch Trap, as an iteration of the Mimic, has William Afton attached to it, and that's where that comes. And you know that then we're going back to it's all been William Afton the whole time. That's possible, but if we're talking about the Mimic being involved of this story, the Mimic has been involved in this story for a longer stretch of time than it was just William Afton. If William Afton's still in there, then you know. If William Afton is still attached to Glitch Trap, then you could argue that William Afton has been the focus for 11 years and the Mimic has been the focus for 6. But that's still crazy. That's still crazy. Because, like, even in that story, if you're arguing that William Afton is still involved somehow with the Mimic, then that's still that William Afton was the focus of the story for the whole time. But more than half of the franchise, time-wise, has been about the Mimic. That's crazy. Oh, man. That's just insane to think about. And again, we didn't get details on what the Mimic was until the past year or two. But at the same time, you can say the same thing about William Afton. That name wasn't confirmed until Freddy Fazbear Pizza Simulator, which came out, what did I say, 2017? So, like, you know, it's the same shit. It's the same shit every time. Oh, I hate Gen 1ers in Pokemon for the same reason why I get so annoyed about some of the people who are fans of this franchise who goes, isn't this supposed to be Five Nights at Freddy's? Where's William Afton? Why isn't Freddy on stage? What the hell's the Mimic? I don't understand any of this. I'm so lost now. It's like, bro, you were there. You were there in the early stages of the franchise where we didn't know who William Afton was until the Silver Eyes came out. And some people said, ain't no way that's the same guy. The story's completely different. And then Sister Location gives us Afton Robotics, so we're like, okay, maybe it is William Afton. But even then, that's Sister Location. That's the 5th game of the franchise. The 5th game of the franchise gave us the last name of William Afton. And some of y'all are complaining that 4 games into the Mimic storyline, we get the entire backstory of the Mimic. What game did that for William Afton? The writing has gotten better. Y'all just grew up. Y'all just grew up. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's people who grew up with FNAF and were used to the weird cryptic bullshit that most of us love. But now that I guess they got a job and they don't have enough time to spend on this like I do, like most of this fandom does. They're like, the hell's the Mimic? Why are they introducing it now? Why are they introducing it now? When did they introduce William Afton? Bro, it's like 4 lines in the whole game. What are we talking about here? This rant was unexpected. I didn't think I would go on this rant. There's a little part of me that gets triggered every time I see people complain that the Mimic story came out of nowhere. When like all of Five Nights at Freddy's has been like that throughout all of the franchise. Like, we work with such crumbs that like imagine if we had a Secret of the Mimic for William Afton. That'd be crazy. I would love that. I'd love to get more information on like hard, irrefutable information on William Afton, why he's doing the things he did, what exactly he did. You know, like, I would love that. But we don't have that. Which is fine. We don't need that. We don't need that. But, like, we have that for the Mimic. And it's still cryptic. Like, you can... one of the best parts about Secret of the Mimic is that it gave us so much information to work with. And so much, like, hard... Here's Edwin Murray. Here's what his deal was. This is what he looks like. There you go. Here's Fiona. This is what she looks like. This is her deal. There you go. Here's the Mimic. Here's how it was created. Here's its deal. There you go. And even though it did that, this is still one of the most puzzling games we've ever gotten. Because it gave us all of this information to cook with, but it didn't give us the recipe. And that's the best kind of FNAF game. That is the best kind of Five Nights at Freddy's game. Because some of the games in this franchise are so hard to solve because they give you so little information that you just don't know what's going on. And some of the games, like Security Breach, tried to do that, but they're so mishandled because of Scott being weird about the creation of the game and yada 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 that it's hard to know what's purposeful, what's an accident, and what was a miscommunication. So it's hard to work with that. And then we get Secret of the Mimic, where we know this was made by a communicative team. We know that people were talking, that Scott was saying what the actual story was meant to be, and it gives us mountains of information. But none of it is directly stating this series of events. So we're still all scratching our heads trying to solve this, but before... when sometimes it would be like, man, I'm scratching my head because I have no idea what could have possibly happened. We have no evidence here. We have so much evidence. How are we going to put it together? And that's so much more engaging and it's so much more fun for theory crafting. When the question is, how do we put the evidence together? Not, where is the evidence? Rant aside, Pigpatch. Do I think the Mimic was planned when Pizzeria Simulator came out? No, I don't think so. I think Pigpatch has heterochromia because it's a fun design. But by the time of Help Wanted 2, when the Mimic is the plan, and they are giving it heterochromia, and they happen to have a character that was in the restaurant that was, I believe the Pizzeria Simulator was made in the old R&D, when you have a character who is in that building that also has heterochromia, suddenly it can be foreshadowing. I think Pigpatch having heterochromia is possibly telling us that M1 had its hands in the honeypot more than we knew. At least helping Henry. In the idea of, like, Henry's trying to kill William Afton, and William Afton wants to make M2 into a copy of himself, so of course M1's like, yeah, I'll help you, what do you need? And we have a feeling that a lot of the mediocre melodies were originally Murray creations. The reason for that is the one mail message that was the explanation for Stan's budget tech, whereas two guys like, let's get out of here, and I stole a bunch of stuff too. And then we get Stan's budget tech, which gives us all the mediocre melodies, which a lot of them look really similar to the Murray's characters. Like we have the hippo carryover, the elephant carryover. We have a lot of things like that. And we have a pig character. Now, it doesn't look anything like Pigpatch, but there is a pig character. So the idea that when they were planning this big animatronic push, that one of the new characters was also given heterochromia, the same one that Fiona already gave Tiger Rock, isn't that far-fetched, especially if, say, David liked pigs. I don't know if there's any evidence saying David did like pigs, but it could very easily be a thing where, like, Fiona's designing these characters, and she's like, David likes pigs. I'll give this pig heterochromia. You know, it could be something that's just as simple as that. That Pigpatch was stolen by the Stan and that other guy to make Stan's budget tech, and then they made the mediocre melodies, and one of them was designed with David in mind because Fiona designed the mediocre melodies. That's totally, entirely possible. It really comes down to how you want to take it. I did not mean to spend 10 minutes on this question and 8 minutes of it not being on this question, but that's why you watch a free-flowing podcast. But thank you for your question, Rebecca. And our next one comes from Kaylee, she, her. If Fiona is not possessing M1, then what was the point of the secret room with the audio log? It seems like if M1 is just learning from recordings and is not possessed, we would not need to hear that recording. What is the purpose of the room, / why would the devs add it if not to show possession? This has been the most confusing thing for me about M1 thus far. Thank you for your question. Same. Honestly, same. So going in, like, leaving Secret of the Mimic, my brain was on the Fiona's possessing M1 train. That was my first thoughts after playing the game. And I still like that theory, but since then there have been theories that have taken me, you know, that I think I agree with that go against it. FNAF's video on M1 and like his big Secret of the Mimic video that is currently out with like the paperclip theory mention, that is one of the videos I'm like, I watched that, I'm like, damn, I can't refute this. This is a really, really good argument for M1 to not be possessed. So why do we have this audio log? And, you know, FNAF addresses it in the video that was Edwin, and that was like the Mimic beginning to, that was the Mimic systems beginning to kind of play the role of Fiona, maybe even tricking Edwin into thinking M1 is possessed. But I don't know. I really don't. If M1 is not, like, your question is written, if Fiona is not possessing M1, I really don't know why we have the 4625 audio log. Because I can't see another reason why we would have that, especially with the weirdness around the number of 4625, how Dolly mentions it, how it's on the mailbox outside of the other version of Murray's Costume Manor. We've seen Help Wanted 2. It's clearly, we have to punch that into the Mex's console to finish it. It's clearly in important numbers for some reason, and the only brass tacks we get for 4625 is the one audio log that goes against everything else we learn about M1. So it's weird. Right? It's one of those weird details of this game that leads you down an entire rabbit hole. It's like the notes of false memories likely from M1, where it's like everything is like, oh, the books have very little to nothing to do with the story of the games. They are just background context. They're different stories. And then you get one note in a basement where seemingly M1 is like, it's weird. I was trying to access my memory logs, but for some reason, I can only remember Tales of the Pizza. It's like, What? So there's a lot of details like that I think is just saying that nobody's gotten it right yet. I think a lot of the details in this game are telling me that nobody, definitely including myself, has gotten it fully correct yet. Whether or not Fiona is possessing M1, if she is, to what extent, how's that affecting things? I don't think anyone has it singularly right because of all of the weirdness surrounding this game with the weird one-off details. And this is one of them. Because not to mention how supernatural the tape sounds, but the context the tape exists. It's in a mimic workshop that is right next to the most paranormal feeling moment of the entire game. It's literally a dark basement where a suit teleports after you, Golden Freddy style, and if you look at it, you have like flashes in your vision, like it's giving you hallucinations, Golden Freddy style, and we all kind of accept that FNAF 1 Golden Freddy is some sort of either astral projection or hallucination or something, like it's not a physical suit blipping into your office. So in the same sense, this Tiger Rock suit can't be a physical suit teleporting. Look, Edwin Murray might have invented recycling, but I refuse to believe that Edwin Murray invented teleporting. So you give us this room that's more supernatural than anything we've seen. Everything else in this game, I think, for the most part, can be explained without the supernatural. But then you have this room, which doesn't make any sense without supernatural. And you attach this tape to it, which makes it sound like M1 is possessed by Fiona. Why? If not to say that it is. Right? Like, that's the main reason I keep coming back to my belief that M1 is possessed by Fiona. Why would you make this entire room with this audio log, linking it to 4625, next to the most supernatural area in the game, if you're not trying to say that M1 is possessed by Fiona? Because that's the only answer I can pull from that. I can't think of a good reason why. But thank you for your question, Kaylee. Our next one comes from Axel Zezer. What if Fiona, F10N4 Fiona, was used towards the purpose... Oh, I've cut off the beginning of this email. It was essentially what if the mimic was used to help create the in-universe FNAF games? What if F10N4 was used towards that purpose in the game's continuity? If she was involved in the creation of FNAF 1 through 6 in-universe, that would explain the similarities between the Murray's life and what we've been told about Henry and William. F10N4 took the tragedy of her life and blamed it all on the one man who caused their downfall, souring whatever reputation Afton had left. Okay. This is one of those theories, and this is not a dig at you, Axel, but this is one of those theories that, in a logic sense, does work pretty well, but in a likelihood sense, I feel like plummets. Because it's one of those things that, when Help Wanted introduced the FNAF 1 through 6 are in-universe games thing, I've always said it's just so that they can make slight retcons without disrupting anything too much. Some people have said that it's only done so Scott could have a fun reason to include FNAF 1 through like the FNAF games in a collection like this. He needed an in-universe reason, and that was it. It wasn't meant to mess with anything. Because again, in Help Wanted, in the same breath, she's like, but the games are a cover-up of real stories. Like, these things actually happened. The games are meant to obfuscate the truth. So, like, with that in mind, I don't know if I buy FNAF 1 through 6, the games were made by the Mimic. Or at least the Mimic was involved in their creation. I think and this is kind of where I branch off of God David as well. I think a lot of the similarities between Edwin and Henry and William are just like the director of Secret of the Mimic, Evan Lampe, said, history doesn't repeat, but it echoes. It's this idea of these recurring stories in the timeline of a man being obsessed with something so much he loses himself and those around him to it. And what are the different ways you can explore that? Because in a lot of ways, the themes and stories of FNAF revolve around obsession over the wrong thing. And William Afton has this, Henry has this, especially, less so in the games because we don't know a lot about him in the games, but in the books, Henry definitely has this. Henry Emily, a lot of people like to ooh babyify Henry Emily as this perfect little good boy. He's a piece of shit in the books. Like, before his kids die, he's generally a great guy. Once Charlie dies, and look, I'm not trying to grief shame here, but once Charlie Emily dies, he becomes the world's worst father. Because, like, first of all, recreating the robot is just for your own grief. And I'm not going to judge him for that part. I am going to judge him for ignoring his son, Sammy, and wife so much that she leaves him and takes Sammy, and he never mentions him again. But he still remembers him because when he finishes Charlie, to make her as accurate as possible, he inputs a fake memory in her mind that she did have a brother named Sammy and he was kidnapped. You got so obsessed over your dead daughter that you remade her as a robot and convinced her the fan fiction of your life where your living son is dead. That's insane. That's crazy. How is Edwin a better father than you? like legitimately, how is Edwin a better father than you? That's crazy. Because, like, Edwin's a shit father too, but that's just because he's neglectful. Like, Edwin went to his living family, as far as we're aware, was perfectly fine. He was just very neglectful because he was so absorbed in his work. And again, the whole obsession over the wrong thing. But Henry's actions are so beyond messed up, it's insane. Again, in the Silver Eyes, we really don't know what he did in the games, but in the Silver Eyes, the idea that he basically made fan fiction where his living son died so his fake robot daughter would feel more realistic. Imagine you're Sammy. If I'm Sammy Emily and I hear that my dad like made a whole fake pizzeria to kill like this serial killer, he's like, the darkest pit of hell is waiting, old friend, I'd be sitting here like, yeah, and he's gonna meet you down there, motherfucker. What are we talking about here? It's crazy. The rants in this episode are insane. But regardless, I think the similar themes of Henry and William and Edwin are because of that history doesn't repeat, it echoes idea that's throughout all of Five Nights at Freddy's, rather than the games were intentionally swayed towards Edwin's life because Fiona was used in the creation of them. I think that's less accurate. I think that makes less sense, especially because, you know, there's the whole indie dev thing where like Fazbear commissioned the games from an indie dev. Fazbear, the company that will always save a buck if they can, no matter what. Why wouldn't they have just fully made it with the Mimic if they were going to use the Mimic to help make it? You know what I mean? That's my thinking anyway. Like, this theory is possible, but I think it's like there's no like hard evidence against it. I just think it's incredibly unlikely. And I also think it would make the idea of the first 6 games being that unreliable, I think that's really unsatisfying, and I think Scott knows that. But thank you for your question. I think we have time for another. I mean, unless I go on another 15-minute rant again. We'll see. This one comes from Logan. They, them. I've noticed a common theme among all the recent Foxy attractions. At the end of Help Wanted 1 log ride, Foxy says, the real treasure was friendship all along. This is repeated in the Help Wanted 2 log ride, and also at the end of the Puppet Show segment in Secret of the Mimic. I believe it all ties back to the story read to M2 in the Moon.exe ending, which also ends in the same phrase. What do you think about this? Thank you for pointing this out, Logan. I never picked this up, but I went and looked, and you're right. And that's crazy. That's insane that Help Wanted 1 log ride, Help Wanted 2 log ride, Foxy Puppet Show, and the storybook all end with, the real treasure was friendship all along. That's got to be intentional. That has to be intentional. And I think it lines up with a theory that I'm probably going to do next week on the connections of Foxy and M1 that was posed in a question, I believe, in the last podcast. That, you know, if M1/Fiona, since Fiona made Foxy, M1 being connected to Foxy makes sense. You know, we don't know for absolute certain that Fiona made Foxy, but, you know, we know that Fiona made Roxy, and it seems like this was all kind of built off in a similar fashion. And then if Fiona made Foxy, then that kind of explains why Foxy is such an outsider throughout the rest of the franchise. And like you said, it has these other connections, like this, the friendship, the real treasure was friendship all along. There's so many connections like this that is making me think that Foxy was a Murray invention, or a Murray creation, specifically designed by Fiona. So if that's true, I think that's what this is hinting to, that M1 in some way is still attached, not literally to Foxy, but like that's her character. So like if Foxy's going to do anything, that's because M1 is in some way affecting it. I haven't spent too much time on this theory yet, but I think that connection has to be intentional, because that's such, like, okay, at the same time, the real treasure was friendship all along is such a cliche, like, children's pirate line, that it does make sense to just keep being used, because it is so like a nothing line. But to also include it in the storybook, something that is narrated by Fiona and Edwin, but likely created by Fiona because she seems to be the artistic one in that sense, that's intentional. I do want to double check. I did do one more double check. It's technically very slightly different, where it's the moral of the story is that friendship is the real treasure. But again, that's way close enough for this to still line up, that this continuing over and over again of friendship is the real treasure. If it's just Foxy saying this, like, okay, that might just be Foxy's catchphrase because he's a pirate in a children's entertainment thing. But having Fiona say it at the end of a storybook just meant for David, frankly, just meant for M2, right? This storybook machine. Oh. That's fucked. I just realized an automatic storybook machine was probably actually meant for David. Because, like, Edwin's not reading him a bedtime story. He's got coat racks to make. So yeah, no, that's fucked. That imagine being David and it's like, hey son, I got you a birthday present. I made it myself. It's a book that has recordings of me reading the same bedtime story to you with a couple details changed. So now you can read yourself a bedtime story in my voice. By the way, this is implying I'm never tucking you in again. Happy 4th birthday, David. That's incredibly likely that it wasn't necessarily built for M2. It was built for David. I mean, it could have been built for M2 too. We really don't know. Because the weirdness about M2 is that, you know, it seems like Edwin refused to make M2 turn into David because he's like, no, it wouldn't be right. He wouldn't be him. We have that audio log. But then we know that M2 began to mimic David. So, like, did he do it anyway? Did he start and then stop? Was M1 feeding M2 David, like, information to try to do it behind Edwin's back? I don't know. That's a weirdness that needs to be figured out. But yeah, that's fucked. Now that I'm thinking about that, it's really funny. But I think that connection is that Fiona is somehow involved in Foxy. And I think that's something I'll have to explore more in a video later. But thank you for your question. And once again, if you want your questions answered on the podcast, feel free to send them in to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. Especially if you want those questions to be in the 100th episode. Make them general, you know, make them overarching. I want to tackle, like, anywhere in the timeline questions for that. I pulled aside like 10 questions, so maybe this isn't the last Secret of the Mimic episode. We'll figure it out. But until next time, as always, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. I hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.